Good morning, traders, and a happy Friday out there to everyone. Hope that y'all had a nice evening there, and it'll be a very interesting day in front of us here. This will be our first Friday of the new year, which means that we'll have our NFP figure out for the U.S. out at 8:30 there, and unemployment rate. Outside of that, 10 o'clock, we also have ISM Services PMI, and then member Barkin set to speak at 1:30 Eastern Time. So a few items on the queue to be aware of. But with that said, we'll be able to jump into these charts here, see where we're landing with things prior to coming into our morning data point. So we've been working on essentially a little bit of the one time framing mode. In other words, we have the lower highs and the lower lows along the way. Yesterday we got some better movement through the daily EMA and have been stepping down in a fairly constructive manner. So as far as the ES goes, we have the back-to-back red bars. What we also have to consider here, if we look at our top of the previous range that we had before, then getting some better extension or getting that persistency of trend extended run to the upside. 46.57.75, quite a ways down there, was the previous high that we breached from, so we're still doing a fairly good job of holding ourselves up above that point in comparison to the NASDAQ future. If we're looking at that same data point, it's 16.410 for the NAS, so a little deeper of an unwind in the NQ versus that of our E-minis, also, lightening up, but not quite to the same degree. So, outside of that, since we're, holding ourselves quite well above that previous level, if we were to have any type of counter-reactive lift, this was also important, the 47.43 and a quarter that we had originally, took out. That was the large bar from the 20th of December that took us some time to take out the top of it, and then likewise took us a while to come in and trade on the other side of it. So in case we have any type of counter-reactive lift at 47.43 and a quarter, it'll be a little bit of a hurdle. So that's where we are standing here on the daily display basis, these E-minis. However, when we come over to the intraday display, it'll just give us a tad more detail, simply because we had a nice extension, right? Just from our slow but surely progress that we had making, right? This was our extended run that we were building out to the upside. So along the way, we had put in a nice impulse bar, so not a whole lot of trading was done through the zone. So we've come down in the overnight session. We came fairly close to trading towards the bottom of the zone, 47.08.75, 47.08 even, and we got down so far to 47.11 and a quarter. So nothing wrong with that. And we'll keep an eye here as far as the 240-minute oscillator composition here. We can see that it's starting to firm up. The slow line's starting to hook up. However, as we well know, we had some pretty decent damage that was done. So filled in a couple of the blanks, and then we'll see up above 43 and a quarter is the low from that 20th bar once again. And then this was a zone that was kind of serving us yesterday, the 47.41 zone. So once again, any type of counter-reactive lift, those are the levels we'd be running into. And then down below, we'd be filling in the rest of the low developed area, 47.08 even there. So S&Ps, certainly some interesting structure to latch onto and keep an eye on. And then moving on along, we'll take a quick look at our DAX future here as well. DAX had also put in a lower low. We had the inside range bar yesterday, so not too much of an extension, but we did trade ourselves on the other side of 16,622. So DAX took out previous day's low and is just working on a little counter reactive lift. So coming back inside to play around in this hourly range, but the 16,622 should be a fairly important level to keep on the sheets there as far as the DAX goes. And then moving on along here, we have our euro currency also in an interesting posturing here. As far as the dailies go, we know yesterday we closed ourselves as a 3-bar balance mode. However, we were mentioning yesterday on the close, see if we would be getting any closer towards that 5 SMA to see if that would be met with selling. We came close towards it yesterday, but overnight not quite able to get up there. So we closed with the balancing act. And then we came down, took out the previous day's low, but not quite taking out that 2-day low there as far as the euro currency goes. So doing a little bit of balancing here, just over the past 2 trading days after having a couple back-to-back high to low bars, and then coming over to the intraday display, such as the 120 minute. Reminds us almost like the S&Ps, right, where we had our large extension bar to the upside and then, proceeded to stem a nice upswing from that. And we've come down, slowly but surely as well. The 120 minute data similar to like what we had in the gold yesterday on the hourly chart. So we've only lent ourselves to a partial retest down. So on this EC, we have some nice levels here down below, which we're holding above 1.09180. Right, started the low developed area in the EC, but likewise up above we have the 1.1 even round figure coupled with also a low developed region there. So we're stuck between these two broader points, essentially 1.1 even in the euro currency and 1.09180. So like watching that 120 minute display though so far, failure to make the full retest down, and we have nice points of interest on both sides of the equation there. So we'll keep a nice eye on our euro currency out there today. And then, as we mentioned there, we got the gold next up here. Also, we want to view this on the 120 minute display. So, likewise, came back. This was during the action yesterday. A partial retest back down. So, we held up with a bit of a higher low initially. However, still, we have 2038 and 2029. Does this remind us of the euro currency or the S&Ps, our large extension bar? So likewise, the gold had a decent swing off of it. We've come back down, put in a higher low. So likewise, similar to that of the euro currency, we have 2029 down below as being the low developed area. Right, single prints and all of that work. Up above, since we failed to make the full retest down, we have a blue line up here, this 2058. For one, that would kind of give us that U-turn feeling, but also if we look just above that, we could say we came down through that zone with some fairly good impulse, so not a whole lot of trading was done above that 2058 there in the gold. So closed yesterday like the EC as an inside range bar, a little balancing act. So in the overnight session this morning, we've also kept it pretty contained, so the gold hasn't really moved outside of its previous day's range as of yet. Alright, we got the crude. The crude had its data there yesterday, its EIA figure. So we came up and briefly looked above the 73.64 mark. Kind of short-lived. We did put in a nice high, even 74 flat. So that's a nice easy number to recall on the sheet. So good extension bar though. Didn't quite take out the previous day's high on the nice impulse bar to the upside, but we took it out on the following day. So for one, we'll have 74 even, the previous day's high, which will serve us. But as you can see on the daily charts, we are a little bit clustered with a pretty good amount of price bar overlap. Still monitoring as well, 72.53, the original cycle low that we had in the crude. We've been having a decent amount of trade and play around that zone. So for now, doing a bit of a holding job above the 72.53. But what's also nice is when we come over here to the 120 minute display, Crude's been having some nice efficient moves, good extensions with not a whole lot of pause bars along the way. So we had the sharp down, sharp up in the crude, right? And we've been proceeding to fill out some range. However, as we'll see here, 74 even up above that previous day's high. When we were coming above this point there yesterday, it was fairly quick to be met with selling activity. So should we come up towards that region for a second time in the crude, we'd just be monitoring since it acted as a little bit of resistance on the first initial attempt there. So 74 even, previous day's high, might just serve us as a little bit of a hurdle there in the crude. And, just to further the point, we could see we also have the inside zones in this area on the 120 minute display, just from our sharp reaction up off those highs that we did have. So as we come back up inside this area, that's kind of what we're dealing with there in the crude. And then last but certainly not least here before our morning data figures is that of the bonds here. The bonds actually quite interesting here because they're finally departing from that previous prolonged range we had been building out, right? For one, hey, at least we got on the other side of the daily EMA because that was still pending in the 30 years where we had taken that out on the previous days in the 10-year notes. So slicing through the 5 SMA and looking over to the left hand side, we know that we had our two very large extension bars from the 13th and the 14th respectively. Right? So that left a little bit of a hole in the data. So as we come back down, trading into these two very large impulse bars, well, we can also note is where we started to get this extension from, right? When we started to take out that 120.25, we really stemmed a nice move to the upside. So even though we are lightening up in the bonds, we haven't quite done the complete filling in of the structure, as we'll see in more detail here on the 240-minute display. So blowing this guy up a notch here. All right, we know we went through the basing action and we had our little, premature excursion outside the zone, and we proceeded to come back, did a lot of trading around that 123, right? And now getting some better acceptance, filling in some of the blanks, but there's that same 120.25 that we have way further down below. So for now, you can see no point in putting a box there, but we can see that we're filling in some of the structural work on the bonds, which I'm sure will show up quite nicely on the market profile display as well. So just good to bear in mind that we're kind of sitting right in the middle of all of this previous low developed area in the case of those bonds. So we'll keep tabs on those for now. Well back above the 4% mark as well. If we want to come over here and take a quick look at the yield display, whether looking at the hourlies, 120-minute, etc. Nice basing action now coming out a little bit here towards the upside or downside in the case of the bond futures, and coming in just a little shy on 4.2% here on the opening. But with that said, without any further ado here, we're going to get these charts dialed back up here. I'll have this data point coming out in a little over 4 minutes, so we'll see how our market responds to that and then what we have lining up for this nice day in front of us here, our first Friday of the new trading year here. So we'll let that all pan out and get ourselves rocking and rolling here for this day in front of us.